Hello again and welcome back. It's time for Chapter 18 of Wayside School is Falling Down by Sachar. Chapter 18 is called The Substitute, which also happens to be the name of a song by The Who. That's one of Mrs. Fletcher's favorites. She just told me that because I was playing it for her. All right, Chapter 18, The Substitute. Pay close attention to the description of the substitute because there's a little joke about it at the end. Benjamin couldn't take it any longer. Today was the day he would finally tell Mrs. Jules his real name. So what if nobody likes me, he thought. So what if I stop getting high marks? Hi, Mark, said Stephen. Hi, Mark, said Jason. Hi, he glumly replied, starting up the stairs. Hi, Mark, said Beebe, as he took his seat next to her. Guess what? We have a substitute. Yahoo! Shouted Mauricia. Everyone in Mrs. Jules' class loved when they had substitute teachers. They loved playing mean, horrible tricks on them. Benjamin frowned. He finally had found the courage to tell Mrs. Jules his real name. Rats, he said. That's a good idea, said Terence. We'll put dead rats in her desk. Let's trick her into going outside, said Joy, then lock her out of the room. But what if she tells Mr. Kidswatter? Asked Eric Fry. So what, said Joy. She'll have to go all the way down to the office, then all the way back up. By then, we'll unlock the door. Mr. Kidswatter will think she's gone bonkers. Benjamin looked at the substitute teacher sitting at Mrs. Jules' desk. She looked like a nice lady. Now listen to her description. She wore tiny spectacles and had long gray hair tied in a ponytail. He felt sorry for her, and he felt sorry for himself. I was going to tell Mrs. Jules my name, he thought. I really was. The substitute stood up and walked to the center of the room. Good morning, he said. My name is Mrs. Franklin. Nobody said good morning back to her. Calvin handed Benjamin a note. At 10 o'clock, drop your books on the floor. Pass it on. Benjamin read it, then passed it on to Todd. Okay, who can tell me what page we're on? Asked Mrs. Franklin. Page 17, called Myron. 112, said Mauricia. 98, said Eric Ovens. 3,000, said Joe. Mrs. Franklin smiled. I guess we'll have to study all of those pages, she said. Benjamin raised his hand. Yes, the handsome young man in the red shirt, said the substitute. He told her the correct page. We're on page 102, he said. Thank you, said the substitute. And what is your name, please? Benjamin thought a moment. He looked around the room and boldly told the truth. My name is Benjamin, he said proudly. Several kids snickered. Thank you, Benjamin, said the substitute. There were more snickers. You're welcome, said Benjamin. It felt good, even if the other kids were laughing at him. Mrs. Franklin asked the question from page 102. Jason answered it correctly. Very good, said the substitute. And what is your name? Jason looked around. Benjamin, he asserted. Half the class giggled. Thank you, Benjamin, said Mrs. Franklin. The other half giggled. Dana answered the next question. What is your name? Mrs. Franklin asked. Benjamin, Dana blurted out, then fell, giggling onto the floor. Thank you, Benjamin, said the substitute. Everyone was hysterical. My, it certainly is a pleasure teaching such happy students, said the substitute. Who knows the answer to question 4? They all raised their hand. They wanted to tell the substitute their names were Benjamin. They were having so much fun they forgot to drop their books at 10 o'clock. At recess, everyone congratulated Benjamin on the great trick. You're a genius, Mark, said Todd. Benjamin is such a funny name, said Jason. How did you think of it? But my name really is Benjamin, said Benjamin. So is mine, said Stephen. Mine too, said Leslie. They all laughed. Do you think she really believes we are all named Benjamin? Asked Eric Ovens. Probably, said Joy. She's so stupid. If she thought we were lying, she would have gotten mad, said Eric Bacon. The bell rang. They all hurried back to class. After recess was social studies. Who would like to read? Asked Mrs. Franklin. Every hand went up. Okay, Benjamin, said Mrs. Franklin, as she pointed at Dana. Everyone laughed. Dana giggled for a few seconds. Then she got control of herself and read the book. Thank you, Benjamin, said the substitute when Dana finished reading. Okay, Benjamin, you may read next, she said, pointing at Terence. Everyone laughed. It was the first time all year Terence had volunteered to read. All day, everyone paid close attention. They all wanted the teacher to call on them, because as funny as it was when Mrs. Franklin called somebody else Benjamin, it was even funnier when she called you Benjamin. So everyone worked hard and listened closely. As a result, they learned more from the substitute in one day than they usually learned from Mrs. Jules in a month. When the final bell rang, everyone crowded around her desk. "Are you coming back tomorrow, Mrs. Franklin?" asked Eric Bacon. Please, Mrs. Franklin, say you will," pleaded Kathy. "You're the best substitute teacher we ever had," said Jason. The substitute smiled. "School is over," she said. "You don't have to call me Mrs. Franklin anymore. That sounds so formal. Since we're friends now, you may call me by my first name." "What is your first name?" asked Mauricia. The substitute gathered up her things, put them in a straw bag. "Benjamin," she said. Then she walked out of the room. Everyone stared silently after her. "Do you think that's really her name?" asked Joy. So, if you noticed, she said her name was Benjamin Franklin, and she had little spectacles and gray hair tied back into a ponytail, like Benjamin Franklin did. So there was a little hint of that earlier. But that's where we stop for today. Tomorrow we will read Chapter 19, A Bad Case of the Sillies. Now, what we know about Wayside School, of course, is there is no 19th story, and Mrs. Arves teaches class on the 19th story. So, we'll have to see what happens in Chapter 19. See you back tomorrow.